Now here's the code in paginate that does all of the work. Remember you saw that the limit keyword that can be appended to the SQL queries can have two values after it. Most people just use limit to limit the number of records returned. So they say something like limit 25 at the end of a query, and they get at most 25 records. But there can actually be two parameters after it. And the first one is the zero relative record number to start. So if you type in at the end of a query limit 025, you will get at most 25 records starting from the 0th record. So at most you will get records 0 through 24 using SQL's zero relative numbering. So here is where we're going to prepare in pagination some conversions between the zero relative numbering that we're going to have to pass into the SQL queries and the one relative numbering that is usable for human reading. And we start up here if we have a base URL which is passed in all the way from the initial call to get from database and render, and that means that we want a callback. We want pagination. And we are also passing in the row count, the number of rows that will be shown on each page. So here, if we want pagination and the total number of rows is greater than the row count, then I'm in the world of pagination. If the total number of rows retrieved is less than or equal to the row count, I don't want any pagination. And you've already seen the pagination controls disappear when they're irrelevant. So I'm only here when I want pagination and I need it. And here what I'm doing is I'm setting the previous offset, and it's commented here so we can see that we're zero relative. We're setting the offset for the next batch, and we also are constructing the information of, in a variable, the number of rows on the last page. So we can see how many there will be there. Now we come into the section where we set the one relative row record numbers for the user interface displaying records 1 to 4 or whatever. And we're coming here, we're taking the offset, which is zero relative, and we're making it into a one relative. Then we do a little bit more manipulation to get the previous and the next page numbers. Up here, remember, we are record numbers, row or record numbers. Now here we're in the world of page numbers, which are always one relative, and they are obviously, in most cases, more than one row or record on a page. And here is how pagination works. If we need links, we are setting up links here to the base URL that was passed in, and these are the first and previous page numbers and the last and next page numbers constructed here from those parameters that have been unloaded and that also have been retrieved from the database. Remember, the first time through get from database and render, I did a count to find out how many records there were. So that is how all of this information has been constructed. You don't have to do anything with it now. This is the code in pagination, and paginate does it. And as long as you are passing in the correct values all the way from the first call to get from database and render, and all you really have to do is say where you're starting from and the number of items on a page, paginate will work. And then you come down here, and this has constructed the links for the first, previous, and next page, and so forth, at the top of the page. It's also said we're displaying this record to that record out of the total number of rows, and these are one relative. Next and previous page numbers. Here is the code that is calling the rendering routine, and if we want a footer with the same pagination controls in the footer, we've got all the data and we just emit the code. So that is what you need in paginate, and in fact in paginate you may not have to change any code at all in the paginate function unless you want to change the way in which it's displayed. But this is the code that you will need to go down, and then you may not even need to change this code, because all you have to do is process the data, and you just need to pass in the name of the function that is going to be called, and most people will just leave it as it is. So paginate, which is the most complicated function here, may not require any changes at all.